At what point does a coincidence stop being just a coincidence? How many times does something need to happen before you establish a pattern? The Charlotte curse has a long history, and unless the pattern changes, you can count on it to happen again. In some form, some way. One thing is certain, the Charlotte curse doesn't prevent success, it just prevents absolute success. Completion. It is like the Greek story of Sisyphus, who was doomed to roll a large stone up a mountain, and just before he would reach the top, where his task would be complete, the stone would roll back down the mountain where he would have to start all over again. The Charlotte music scene is filled with Sisyphus stories. SpongeTones was signed to a major label, had a video in a regular rotation on MTV. Lead singer Hope Nichols was the personification of hippie punk. They were dropped and could no longer use the name SpongeTones. Luster, same story. Signed to a major label, success was within reach, then dropped, and not only couldn't perform under their name, but wound up owing the label money. Animal Bag actually had a top 40 hit, when there was such a thing as top 40, appeared on the pilot episode of My So-Called Life, and by their second album, dropped. Heart Soul Poets toured with Hootie and the Blowfish, changed their name to Jolene, and had success with their song Pensacola. Then they were dropped. And the Charlotte band that has rolled the stone up the mountain more than any other band, meet the SpongeTones.
Here I go again. Here I go again. Baby, I don't wanna be alone again. Here I go again. Here I go again. Baby, I don't wanna be alone again. There were so many girls at the dance last night. I was making eyes at you, trying to get you in my sights. And then you came over to me, and I thought there'd be a chance that I'd only kissing you before the night was through. Here I go again. Here I go again. Here I go again. Here I go again. Baby, I don't wanna be alone again. Here I go again. Here I go again. Here I go again. Here I go again. Baby, I don't wanna be alone again.
Riding the new wave of nostalgia for the 1960s, it was the early 80s when the SpongeTones broke into the scene. From Charlotte, North Carolina, the SpongeTones were making waves across the country. But don't take my word for it. In Steve Boyle's documentary, Return to Combo Land, Darius Rucker of Hootie and the Blowfish described it best.
Growing up and playing music in the Carolinas, you know, the bands like the DBs, the bands like the SpongeTones, you know, Don Dixon, they had a following. They could go play these big clubs and they had these great following. To us, the SpongeTones and Don Dixon were the biggest band, you know, they were some of the biggest bands in the country. You know, you open up for the SpongeTones and, you know, then you watch them and you go, wow, we're not worthy to be a band.
Playing at the legendary CBGB's and opening for national acts, the SpongeTones rubbed shoulders with the legends of rock and roll. Here is Graham Nash of Crosby, Stills and Nash when they opened for his band, the Hollies. Nicky Hopkins, the legendary piano player who recorded with The Who, The Kinks, The Rolling Stones, most of the Beatles' solo albums and countless other acts, played piano on the Beatles' song Revolution. Oh, and he also played for the SpongeTones.
Nicky Hopkins!
While recording their second album at Reflection Studio in Charlotte, another band was recording their first album at the same studio, REM. REM provided some tracks for the SpongeTones, and the SpongeTones returned the favor. Excitement that something was about to break came when the SpongeTones received stellar reviews from national publications, namely a magazine called The Rolling Stone, reviewing not one, but 2 albums, exclaiming, and I quote, "It sounds like the soundtrack to a party so good it could never happen in real life." Writers for the Rolling Stone were not the only ones to take notice.
Shall take a step back, if you will. We'll rate this one by the SpongeTones. My Girl, Marianne. Very close rated, 89, 85, 87, so we'll give the nod to the SpongeTones, but they're sort of equal. What was good about this one?
I liked the bit. It was original.
Will it be a big seller?
I hope so.
You rated both of these, Jeff, very highly, but you preferred the second one. What appealed to you about this one?
It seemed like a song that you could really like drive in your car to as well as dance, and I thought it was a really good song. I liked it.
Dick Clark played not one, but 4 SpongeTones songs on American Bandstand. But this is not a story of days gone by. While American audiences begin to numbly consume what corporate radio force-fed them, other countries took notice of the SpongeTones, making it possible for them to tour Japan. And yet the SpongeTones continue to break into the subconscious of America, even today.
If you watch every day, then you've probably caught the Skinny or Celebrity News and our gossip segment, and you probably know the catchy theme song.
It is infectious, isn't it?
It is.
That tune was done by a band called the SpongeTones, by the way. They started out as a Beatles cover band, but now they do mostly original music, and you can check them out over at iTunes.
She's so skinny and so thin, I've gotta make her mine.
We were looking for a musical signature for a new segment we were doing, which we called The Skinny.
I went to the mailbox and there was this like kind of big check there, and it was like, wow, what is this? It's ABC World News Now.
I think our viewership appreciates it, but they haven't, until now, specifically identified it with the SpongeTones.
The SpongeTones have rolled the rock up the mountain over and over, and maybe one day will break the Charlotte curse. And lo, unto you, look for these to be the signs that the Charlotte curse is broken. The Democratic National Convention will go off without a hitch, and the whole world will be watching, and Charlotte will look great. Barack Obama will be re-elected president. Former Mayor Pat McCrory will become the next governor of North Carolina. The Carolina Panthers will play and win the Super Bowl. The Charlotte Bobcats will not suck. Bank of America will be nice. Talking Baby gets a TV show. Various Charlotte bands will reunite and play to sold-out crowds. The SpongeTones will get a hit. Jamie Hoover will be nominated for a Grammy. Until then, stay tuned for the continuing developments of the Charlotte curse.
You scare me, putting thoughts in my head, words best left unsaid.